And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Patronistas podcast. This is episode number 2, and we will be talking about an interesting project coming out of Honduras, which is a charter city called Próspera, on the first part of this episode. And on the second episode, we will be talking about events that have been developing in Colombia as a result of the budget reform bill that was being proposed and the subsequent protests that have occurred as a result of the budget reform bill. All right, so with me we have Henry. Hey, Henry, how's it going?
All is going well. Tuning in, listening in. I would be the one who's facilitating the podcast on Próspera, Honduras, because this is something that came up with my interest, and Klaus and I are both people who are interested in talking about this topic.
All right, sounds great. And with us, we also have Checho tonight. Hey, Checho, how's it going?
It's all right, man. I'm really interested to learn about finances and maybe giving a little bit of insight about it on there from both of you.
All right, cool. So this project was brought to my attention through Henry. He sent me a Substack article about the topic, and it was really interesting because it's very much what we've been talking about, but it's basically they've already pretty much set in motion this project that is basically, as I've said before, it pretty much touches on a lot of things that we've been talking about through the creation of this production, and more importantly of all, what shocked me the most was that it was in Honduras that this happened. Honduras is not really a place where you tend to find these type of things. At least not that certainly caught me off guard. So, Henry, would you mind talking us through about this project that you came across?
Yeah. So, question at hand and the topic at hand, if I'm not mistaken, is Próspera in Honduras, right? And basically, so first paragraph. But basically, the reason this article caught my interest is because, as someone who, me myself, I studied political science. As someone who studied political science, that didn't go into political science, I went into the finance route, was just interested in an ideology that basically talked about excess of libertarianism, or anything that has to do with low tax burden can give us. And when I say us, it's specifically to Latin America, because this has been rare, and it's just been something that hasn't been presented. So this article caught my attention on Twitter, and I read through it. If any of you guys have an opinion or a comment on it.
Sure. This reminds me a lot of the origins of Shenzhen. Maybe not for necessarily the exact same reasons, but it's very interesting that at least one Latin American country has realized that free economic zones are kind of important if you want to maintain the type of government that you have. And in Hispano-America, it's mostly been social democrat states with some limited form of welfare, but the economic inefficiencies of said governments, since they're very interventionist and protectionist, doesn't give them enough cash to supply for these government programs or these welfare programs that they so want to implement. So it's very interesting how Honduras kind of bucks the trend among Hispanic nations, and again, sorry.
It's also very important why Honduras, out of all the neighboring countries, have took this trend to go about it this way to its to be interested in Próspera, right? You know, Honduras is the poorest country. Honduras is the country that has given the United States the most immigrants per capita. But the most interesting part about Honduras that I want to inform the viewers is that el hondureño who leaves his country, the Honduran who leaves his country, whether he goes to Guatemala, El Salvador, or Mexico, Texas, is that the pay that he received increases like 3, 4, 5, 6-fold. And this project here that is coming from a very, I'll say this, libertarian sense, Próspera, says this, that el hondureño does not have to leave his country because Próspera is offering him 6 times fold to increase his pay. So this is like really important to migration and to the economic development of one's country that I want to get at.
And that is such an interesting topic, because that's something that we haven't really tackled very much in the Pocho Hours, this kind of excessive brain drain where a lot of people in Hispano-America are moving to mostly the United States, but also to Europe and increasingly to the Middle East and Central Asia. As someone who actually did move to the Middle East because his father found a very lucrative job over there after 20 years of slaving away in Colombia, you definitely see that there's so many talented people leaving our countries and who may never really come back, apart from being sort of, I guess you could say, glorified tourists.
Fuga de cerebros.
Yeah, una fuga cerebral, exactly. And I want to prevent that, because I want the best people of our people to be back home, as the best engineers, the best doctors, the best lawyers, the best whatever. And the only way we can keep them in Hispanoamerica is to give them enough good paying jobs and a stable and sound economy for them to want to stay, because most people do want to stay in their home country. It's where they're most comfortable. It's where they have all their friends, all their family. Their roots are here. And it's kind of difficult to move to a foreign country. You don't know anyone. The culture is different. The language is different. And a lot of people move because they have to. And that's why I was so interested in this project, which can be kind of like the domino that starts the domino effect of this happening in other Hispanic, which can help the brain drain maybe slow it down and hopefully even stop it. So that's why I was very interested in this topic, and thank you for touching on that.
Might I take the word?
Sorry?
There's an important part to it, because you know that South Korea was in really bad shape in the 60s, right? Like, it was out of the Korean War. It was basically in poverty. It was in a really bad shape economically. And you could tell that a lot of South Koreans that were engineers, that they were lawyers, or mathematicians, people that were into physics, they went out of the country to Japan in order to seek for opportunities. And once that that this Eastern Tiger, more or less, phenomenon, where all of these Asian countries, they develop more or less like Japan, Korea, Singapore, they started developing better political institutions, more financial security, better advancements for labor market. That all of these people that went out, they came back to their countries. And I think that can happen in the next 10 to 15 years in Hispano-America, in Southern America, if there's better political institutions, if there's more incentive to people that are out to come here. Because in that sense, why would you go? Why would you go back if you are gonna have corruption, if you're gonna have a bad government, if you're gonna find yourself in poverty? Like, you love your country, you love your land, but you want some decent conditions so you can work in it and work for it. And once the brain drain not only stops but reverse, there will could we talk about nation building.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's happened to me. As you know, the field that I am studying for is just not something you can make money in Colombia. It's just not possible, especially with the amount of money that I've invested into this, and it hurts because I really want to work in my country. I want to, through the work that I do, it helps my people. I would pay taxes to the Colombian government, or I would be close enough to needy people that I can give charity to. But just being thousands and thousands of kilometers away from Colombia, it's a lot more difficult for me to help my country, even though I want to. And the things that my country's not helping me either with this. I mean, we'll get into it in the second half of this episode with all this taxation going on and this debt and the peso just becoming more worthless every day, and it's sad, and certainly that's why I was so interested in this. Henry, you want me to scroll down on the article a bit more, or are you not reading from the article?
Yeah, I'm listening in, and I'm listening into your story because it's really telling to the article we have at hand. Where are we in the article by chance?
I shared it just at the beginning where it says, "Who amongst us hasn't looked at the great edifice of human civilization?" Over here. I thought you were gonna have like some highlight quotes from the article, something like that.
Um, no, good. I'm going off the cuff about the article, but reading off the article is what should be done. And part of the article, so what I have to say, second paragraph. And who among us, having had the dream, has entered into a multi-year hold on, no among us having multi-year nominations into the government of Honduras, taking advantage of the clause of Honduras, Kuwait territory and its reciprocal investment, guaranteeing them the right to pursue vision unmolested, raising millions of capital, raising millions of venture capital, and has bought on a Caribbean island to it into a reality. So here's the thing about Próspera and Próspera Honduras is that Guatemala and Dominican Republic are the countries that are interested in being a part of Próspera. Now, it's really interesting, is that I'm a capitalist. Yes, I'm a ruthless capitalist.
Oh, so you are part of a small minority of people that wear small little hats and have big
No,
noses?
no, 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 no. I'm not a small hat. I'm not a Wall Street hat wearer. But I'm a Hispanic. I am a Dominican who's worked hard to get to where I'm at, to say that I'm a capitalist. And why am I a capitalist? Because I will tell you this, that I'm not going to wear a small hat for you, but I'm going to tell you this. I worked hard to get where I'm at, and that when it comes to the part of who should I loan money to is being disputed, I'm going to listen in and listen to what's being disputed. but that doesn't stop me from doing my job. It just doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop me because, as much as we bring up small hats, Wall Street hats, I call them Wall Street hats. I've seen a lot of small hats, but Wall Street hats I'm opposed to, and many Catholics are as well. And I think we are willing to dispute that. If that makes sense.
Right.
Well, I would tell you that there's a difference between you because you want to look not only for your own good, but for the good of your family, for the good of your nation, of your fellow Hispanics and your fellow men and your fellow religious community. And the small Wall Street head, well, mainly he doesn't care about anyone but himself. And I will tell you that there's this is a good part, like to differentiate ourselves from that tribe.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a big challenge. Um, differentiating my differ, differentiating myself from the small hat tribe. Um, it is a challenge, and it's hey, look, you bring up you bring up a great contention. I don't have an answer to that, but you do bring up a great.
Well, I will give you the answer. The difference is that you are not only moved by your own interest, but you're moved by the interest of your family. You know, that's what I find appalling in Klaus' life and your life, because you're not only working for yourself, you're working for your family, for your future wife and kids, and you gotta remember that a nation begins with the family, and the small hat doesn't care about nation, he doesn't care about family. So you're not a small hat because you care about other people.
Right. Yeah. And here's the thing: I'm coming at it from an Anglo perspective. I was raised in the Anglican Church, so my understanding of work and hard work ethics comes from the Protestant Anglican Church of the Protestant work ethic that the Catholic disputes and debates. But that's just how I grew up with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would think that there's a part that in these projects we always ought to see, because I think that these projects here are important for the community because, as you said, why would a Honduran go to Texas or to Mexico if he can stay in his country, work in a fair pay, he can build his family and build his community like this has like one domino leads to the other, you know?
Yep, you're right.
All right. So I wanted to get into this part of the article because it was really interesting to me. The concept of sedes. So it
Yep.
says here, quote, in 2009, Nobel winning economist Paul Romer proposed a new type of governance structure. Underdeveloped countries looking for an economic boost could donate territory to some entity considered non-corrupt and skilled at governance. For example, a successful country like Switzerland. The recipient entity would govern the territory as effectively as it could, bringing improved human rights and economic growth. If this went well, it would be a win-win. The region's citizens would get good governance, safety, and wealth. The underdeveloped donor country would get to skim a line off the top as taxes, plus the downstream benefits of having a well-developed economic hub in their country. And the successful recipient country would get bragging rights, investment opportunities, and comparatively cheap labor. In Honduras, with
Yep.
70% of its population in poverty, the fifth highest murder rate in the world, and a political system widely recognized as corrupt and dysfunctional, was running low on options. They approached Romer and expressed interest in his idea. Together, Romer and Honduran officials developed the SEDE, Spanish acronym for Zone for Employment and Economic Development, a generic model for creating special economic zones, in other words, charter cities, within Honduras. Close quote. So this really is a lot like Shenzhen, which is very interesting because if you look at the history of China, specifically the communist China, there was a point at which the communist government could no longer continue with the lies of Mao. And so when Premier Deng Xiaoping essentially became the supreme leader of China, because they don't really call him the president, it's communism, so it's convoluted. He basically had to disown China's Maoist past without technically doing so, because obviously, if the party disowns Mao and if the party was responsible for Mao, what does that make of the party, right? And so what Deng eventually started doing was introducing market-based reforms into the Chinese economy, because up until Deng's proposals and his government, China was pretty much a mess. There's things like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, which really should be called the Great Leap Backwards and the Cultural Devolution, in which a lot of traditional Chinese culture was destroyed, a lot of the economy was wrecked for no apparent reason, a lot of wildlife was killed as well. If you look at I think it's called the Four Sparrows or Five Sparrows program, where eventually Mao told people to kill a bunch of birds because he thought the birds were eating off the grain and harming the revolution. And turns out they were useful pest control. And next thing you know, there's a pest and a famine in China. But anyways, that's a long history, and it's not the topic of this conversation. Essentially, what Deng Xiaoping has started doing was introducing a little bit of capitalism into China, because he realized that, well, people need to eat. The revolution may be all good and all, but people still need a way to make ends meet. And so he created a couple of economic zones, the most important one being Shenzhen. And nowadays, Shenzhen is pretty much considered the East Silicon Valley. A ton of Chinese technology companies are based in Shenzhen. The most well known, and you guys might know of this one, it would be Tencent. They own like a bunch of games and game developers nowadays. But DJI is headquartered in Shenzhen there as well. If you fly a drone, it's most probably a DJI drone. There's a couple more that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But this is really interesting. And if we can have this model of Shenzhen, but make it more Hispano based, I think that would be great, honestly, because I think one of my concerns with these sort of free economic zones is that they end up being this sort of very plastic place where it's only somewhere you go to work and get money. And I would like there to be some more Hispano based additions to these type of areas, like having the traditional Hispanic town center where there's always the church and then the government building right next to it, or usually to the opposite of it with the town square. Uh, I would like to see maybe a cathedral or two in these economic zones, some traditionalist colonial architecture. But that's just me. I don't know what you guys think of my concerns in regards to that. Hello? Anybody? No? Hold up. Ah, okay. Checho.
Well, I don't know too much about this. Like I understand like the need for investment and building powerful institutions, but yeah, I think that it is important. You can see the role of the Supreme Court and of uh, the the security of law, like that when where things are going and how things are gonna develop, so you can have the security that well tomorrow my property is not gonna be taken by the government, so I can invest with more freedom, not only freedom but knowing that the value of my property is gonna be respected.
Absolutely. Well, I was more talking about like how certain economic zones are very empty, and there's not a lot of what we would call sort of so there's not a lot of essence in them sometimes, and hopefully Prospera would be a little different. So I would like to see a couple of churches, and maybe even a cathedral in Prospera, and would like to see more traditionalist architecture. Now, from what the concept pictures show, it looks a bit too modern for my taste. I would like it to be a bit more
Yeah,
based on Hispanic
on the
colonial architecture.
yeah, I think that that's a problem sometimes with these free zones that they don't do not accommodate to the local traditions or customs, but they have like this common model for everyone.
Yeah, it's and they even say here it's quite modular. Let me see if I'm not mistaken. Yes, see, what will Prospera be like? Cost modular, and so I can we can certainly have our criticisms of that, and and again we can definitely try and say, look, let's make this more sort of Hispano in a way. We can like hopefully we can talk to some of the people that are involved in this project and tell them our concerns about how it would be great if the architecture could abide by, or at the very least be inspired by, Honduran architecture, which obviously bases itself from traditional Mayan architecture and Spanish colonial architecture and all that. And you can even incentivize this. You can even tell some of the guys involved in this project, okay, if you build these buildings like this, how we want you to build them, we'll give you even more tax breaks and we'll help you out even more in this thing and that thing, and we want these buildings to last hundreds of years, that type of thing. So I guess that's kind of the good thing about being in government and having a clear goal and being able to cooperate with these companies is that you can help them with their tax situation, and then in return they'll do some of your bidding if you're kind of if you kind of know what you're doing. Henry, are you still there with us? Yo,
Henry,
Henry.
yo, papi, dímelo.
Oh, okay. He's not here. All right. So, damn. Okay. So let's keep reading on and see. Uh, let's talk about this a bit more. So it's here. It says, "Quote: Sounds nice and straightforward, I guess. Nope. The original implementation of the SEDE law was a disaster. In 2009, Honduras leftist-ish president Manuel Zelaya proposed a referendum to change the constitution, which his opponents interpreted as a plot to remove term limits and rule indefinitely. The Supreme Court ruled against him. Zelaya ordered the military to assist in holding the referendum anyway, and the military held a coup instead. They appointed the next person in line of succession of the interim president, then held tense elections, which were partially boycotted by Zelaya supporters and have debated legitimacy. Conservative candidate Porfirio Lobo Sosa won and became president. Loa's chief of staff, Octavio Sanchez, stumbled upon the TED Talk where Romer discussed charter cities and invited him to Honduras for negotiations. And then it says here from Octavio Sanchez, many people all over the world don't understand that we are poor not because we are dumb. We are poor because of our institutional arrangement, not because we lack the capacity to imagine things. Loa's party controlled Congress and got a charter city law passed. After this, the story gets kind of murky. Paul Romer's version was that they appointed him head of a transparency committee to make sure that whatever happened was in the best interest of Honduras. Then started negotiating with a company called MKG Group without telling him. Upset at the opacity and also at the negotiations themselves, he preferred having a foreign country administer the zones, not a private corporation. He resigned in protest. Honduras' version is that Romer was never appointed head of anything and there was no transparency committee. Attention turned to a
I'm
definitely
here.
existing.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes. Now we can hear you. There you go. So apparently the first. Okay, so close quote. And apparently when they tried to implement the first sede, it was kind of a mess because I guess Honduran politics is very unstable, so they weren't able to get it through. And it says here, after various other failed projects and false starts, we come to Próspera and the present. Could this work? Maybe. Proponents point out that the idea of a sede or charter city is similar to, in fact stronger than, the idea of a special economic zone, which transformed the cities of Shenzhen in China and Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. As you can see here, here's both Shenzhen and Dubai in 1980 and 1991 respectively, and here they are in 2018 and 2020 respectively. Quite cool, quite interesting. And yes, Dubai it really does look like that. I've been there. It's really nice. You know, it's got its issues. Don't get me wrong, but it's pretty nice nevertheless. You could tell similar stories about the success of Hong Kong and Singapore, two other polities with little to recommend themselves other than a different and more competent regime than the surrounding regions. The idea behind charter cities is this: Shenzhen, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the rest of the rich world aren't rich because their citizens are morally superior to those of their poorest neighbors. They're rich because they have better legal systems, less corruption, stronger rule of law, and more competent administrators. Now, here's a very interesting chart which displays the ease of doing business in the Próspera sede as compared to Honduras. So, in a scale of 0 to 5, the amount of labor restrictions in Honduras is 2.4, so almost literally at the middle of the scale, and in Próspera is 0.5, which is quite low. So starting a business in a number of steps, in Honduras it takes about 11 steps, which is very reminiscent of how it would be in Colombia. There's a lot of what we call papeles and trámites you got to go through just to start any small, normal, formally recognized by the government type of business in Colombia, which is not coincidentally, which is causally, by the way, the reason why the gray economy is so numerous in Colombia. So this is what we call as well the informal sector. A lot of people who have businesses which are not formally registered with the government. Most commonly, it would be sort of food stands. They're pretty much ubiquitous in Colombia. They're pretty much everywhere. But there are other things as well. It's not just food stands. And so this is certainly one of the reasons as to why there are so many informal businesses and businessmen and businesswomen in Colombia as well. So in Honduras, it takes about 11 steps. Instead, it takes about 3. And I'm assuming it's just basically incorporating, setting up your tax ID, and I don't even know what the third step could be, but it sounds very similar to New Zealand. It's very simple. So number of days, Honduras 42. I mean, that's just that's just crazy. Like, that is just insane. 42 days to start a business? Why does it take so long? I'm assuming it's because of its corruption, bureaucracy, right? In Próspera, it takes about 1 day.
Yeah, and that's the most important aspect to Próspera and the success it would have, is that it takes 1 day. And why does it take 1 day? Well, because successful businesses that we have as examples, in 1 day is what we have, and in 1 day is what we have been shown. So yeah.
The Honduran figures remind me a lot of the Colombian figures. It's actually kind of scary how similar they are. They're almost 1-to-1, basically.
But look, let's be honest. Latin America. Let's be honest about Latin America. Interviews for hispano, right? What are the problems we have in a country that are stopping us from succeeding, right? Let's be honest, right? Allende, right? The Chilean guy in 72. Why is the Hispanos we are opposed to him, right? Pro-American, American educated. That's just truth, right? But for Chile, Chile got Pinochet, se la vida, and you're gonna tell me to this day that Chile was wrong for getting who they got. That's not the point. The point I'm making as the investment or as someone who's interested in geopolitical politics, right, is that prior to Pinochet and prior to this point is that we didn't have much options, and when we do have these options, and we take the people that are given to us, like Pinochet and etc. I hope you understand that the reason that they take these people and elect them and whatnot is because countries, given where they're from, are countries that are as host countries that don't have any other options for them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see where you're getting at. All right, so and then the last figure over here is number of days to get a permit. 32 days in Honduras. That's a month. That is an entire month where you're basically stuck, with your what in your hands, doing nothing basically because you can't operate without a permit. And so if you already have your if you have the business, you have everything that the business requires, but you're not able to operate it, that's lost revenue. Like you're already losing money just waiting for the permit. But in Prospera, it's 1 day. 1 day. That is just, and there's no other reason as to why it would need to last any more than, I would say, probably 4 business days. But Prospera isn't even saying that. Prospera is saying 1 day. You'll get your permit. You'll get your everything on track. It's only 3 steps required. You're on the day you're ready to go. On the day all your permits are valid, and you're ready to start helping people out. You're ready to start creating a business, because that's what small businesses are. It's people who have a dream, want to realize it, and they help people with their first jobs. A lot of people start their first jobs with small businesses. So I'm already loving these figures already, and especially because I have seen just the ins and outs of starting a business in Colombia, because I have seen people try to do startups, and I haven't been involved. I was involved in one, and it is a nightmare. It is such a
Gotta
bureaucratic
pay
nightmare.
taxes in the entry. Gotta pay taxes in the meantime. Gotta pay taxes in the end time. Bro, if you wanna open a startup here in Colombia, you are my hero.
Literally, I mean, you are fucking more powerful than Superman if you can start like a successful business in Colombia. That is like almost unheard of, right? That's why most of the big companies are many, many, many years old. They're very much grandfather companies. There are very few successful Colombian companies f- from this century, from the 21st century. And here you go. So let me see. Quote: Poor countries don't have corruption, crime, and incompetence because they choose to. They have those things because they vested interests, zero-sum games, and poor education make it hard to improve things. If you could get part of a poor country to be under a rich country-style government, it too could get rich the same way all those other places did. Honduras allowed sedes in order to test this hypothesis and see if it offered a radical solution to poverty. So what is Próspera? Próspera is Honduras' first sede. In one sense, Próspera is a 58-acre tract of unoccupied land on the island of Roatan, between a fishing village and a golf course. 58 acres is small. The nearby golf course is bigger. Close quote. Very interesting that it was also based on a fishing village, just like Shenzhen. It's giving me a lot of like deja vu here. It's crazy. And that, as you guys can see, it's a pretty small sort of area. But that's just phase 1, though. I'm assuming that they're going to expand wants to get into phase two. All right.
Something that I really
Yeah,
like.
I'm just listening in. You guys don't.
Yes, Henry, you were saying?
No, you guys good. I was just listening to what you guys.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna mute you because there's some background noise.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
All
There's,
right.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Henry, but there's something that I really like. That it ponders upon the legal system, and on the security that law brings to business. That sometimes is forgotten under the myth that, Hispanos are, they're so lazy people, they don't know how to work. And you can figure it out with Mexican Americans, Venezuelan in America, Cubans in America, Dominicans, Colombians, that we are maybe the hardest people, well, maybe the toughest there. I think that it ponders upon the corruption, and as an alternative to everything that has to be with bad public management of not only law but of private business. There is a proper response to that.
Yeah, exactly. They're basically, rolling their sleeves and getting it done instead of what the typical Hispano-American does and just complain, protest, cacerolazos, vote for a corrupt guy who says he's gonna end corruption, and then surprise,
Absolutely,
surprise, 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 he also turns out to be corrupt, and then you just go on and on and on in this endless carousel, and that's what I
absolutely,
enjoy. Yeah.
absolutely. And sorry, right, 100% about that.
Yep. All right. So
And by
yeah.
chance, for the viewers, if anyone's interested, I have my stepfather, Dominican, who's interested in having or answering anyone's questions about such topic.
All right. So let's talk about who's doing this. Says, quote, in the original plan, charter cities would be governed by some respected and competent foreign powers like Switzerland. This fell apart for various reasons, with worries about national sovereignty and colonialism, no sign Switzerland actually wanted to help. And the new version is that they'll be governed by a corporation full of visionaries and experts and other hopefully non-corrupt people. The corporation will only make money if the sede becomes economically productive. Corporations seem to like making money. So in theory, this gives them an incentive to govern wisely. The particular corporation involved in Próspera is Honduras Próspera Inc., and its founder and CEO is Eric Bremen. Bremen comes from Venezuela, where he briefly flirted with socialism and Chavismo as a teenager before, quote, reality opened my eyes just to how wrong it was. He immigrated to the United States, entered finance, rose through the ranks, founded an insurance company in Colombia, and eventually started a social impact investment corporation called New Way Capital to promote growth in Latin America. Próspera started out as one of New Way's projects and quickly grew into a separate and more ambitious company. New Way is barely 5 years old, has single digit to low double digit employees, and seems to deal with sums of money in the single digit millions. They hardly seem like the sort of people that you would expect to see founding their own city. Is there anyone else involved? HPI is getting some funding from Pronomos Capital, who are exactly the sort of people you would expect to see founding their own city. Pronomos is a group of Silicon Valley libertarians interested in competitive governance. Their site predicts crowd choice in governance providers, new startup societies approved by existing states, and completely new developments in unclaimed areas such as the high seas or celestial bodies. Some of them are veterans of the Seasteading Institute who wanted to create charter cities on floating platforms in international waters. Pronomos is run by former SI head Patty Friedman, grandson of Milton Friedman, son of David Friedman, and their advisors include cryptocurrency mogul slash VC slash outspoken libertarian Balaji Srinivasan, legendary venture capitalist Naval Ravikant, and loads of other apparently rich and famous people who I know less about. I think we'll all be disappointed in Peter Thiel if you were not invited in this somehow, and it looks like, in fact, he's a major Pronomos founder. But as far as I can tell, the big name billionaires are only providing the money. Weird as it sounds, Próspera is mostly the project of a small company started by a Venezuelan guy who's really passionate about helping Latin America. Close quote. Man, this guy, I'm really liking this guy, by the way. The way he sounds, he's really the typical libertarian story. He used to be a flaming leftist, and being a Venezuelan, he was obviously flirting with Chavismo. He realized how wrong he was. He read a book on economics, and instead of complaining to the government and relying on democracy like the average person does, he decided to do things on his own. He decided that I'll just rather do as all great men do and build something as opposed to nag people into building something. Very much sort of Randian, but in the good way in that regard. And certainly I would, yo, Henry.
I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to ask you. I think we might be able to talk to this guy eventually. I think you're setting something up, right?
Yeah, I'm setting something up. What I've set it up is with him and his assistant, who's Honduran, and it didn't go as I was intending. But I think you and I, Klaus, could have a successful interview with him, the Honduran, on certain topics. The interview still open. My stepfather is really interested in talking about the topics that were had at hand with you and I about capitalism.
Yep, sounds cool. All right, so let me see. All right, so it says here, who will live in Prospera? And quote, Prospera expects 10,000 residents by 2025. They're especially focusing on Honduran professional and remote workers. The more remote, the easier a time they'll have moving to a new city on an island. But they're also interested in poorer Hondurans looking for construction and service jobs, and expats after a slice of paradise on a tropical beach. Interested? All you
Yeah.
need to do is sign the social contract, pay the membership fee, get Honduran residency, and they say the prompt is pretty easy. Sorry.
Klaus, I have my stepfather who's interested, Kiki, interesado de progreso en su país, y Kiki te puede decir de los problemas que. So here's the thing, is that his extension was about Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and there was another country, Honduras, that he wants to go after. And I have Kiki with me again, my step pops, who is willing to talk about what the challenges in his countries, in the Dominican Republic, and what they face, and what you might have to ask.
Interesting. And also, what I really like about this project is that it doesn't feel like a sort of gentrifying project where it's just a bunch of rich people who want to have prime Central American real estate. They're making it abundantly clear that they do want this to be a very Honduran sort of experience, as I just quoted. They want to hire Hondurans to help out with the construction and the service industry, part of Prospera and all that. And it seems like fees are a lot more affordable for Hondurans.
Yeah.
It says here that the price is $260 a year in membership fees, which is a lot.
Esto es lo
Sorry.
que Kiki quiere hablar de ese tema, porque en Honduras y en Guatemala, donde el empresario quiere invertir, en Dominicana. So Dominican Republic is a prosperous place because it is differentiated from the two countries that as mentioned. If that makes sense, Klaus.
Yep.
Kiki, Dominicana, si tú le puedes decir a la gente que están escuchando, porque Dominicana, o sea, porque Dominicana es una parte que uno puede invertir. Y si tú lo puedes...
Ok, él le quiere invertir en terreno, en vivienda o en una empresa que quiera instalar. Eso yo te puedo decir, Carlos, más o menos, en cuestión de terreno, si yo te puedo decir, mira, en tal zona, si es la capital, si es en Romana, si es en Punta Cana, si es en...
Sí, porque esa es la pregunta.
Sí.
Los empresarios quieren invertir en Dominicana.
Sí.
Porque comparado a los otros países, Honduras, Guatemala, Dominicana es un país que uno quiere invertir. Y tú, Kiki, que sabes más que otro, ¿por qué Dominicana va a ser un país que uno quiere invertir?
¿Qué es lo que te digo?
Más que otro país.
Por eso te digo,
eso es lo importante.
Si tú quieres invertir en terreno tú quieres invertir terreno para vacas, que es algo que da producción, que hay producción constantemente, porque con la vaca tú sacas tu leche diario, ¿verdad? Hay producción. Si te vas a la área de la construcción, tú haces un condominio y te va a entrar dinero mensual. Si haces un hotel, te va a entrar dinero diario. ¿Entendiendo las inversiones? Como más o menos tú...
100%.
Claro que tú no... Yo digo inversiones que tú no vas a perder. ¿Entiendes? Porque no te voy a llevar a un terreno de que a tú a invertir si a 30, 40 años se da. No, yo te doy...
No, como un dominicano, tú le estás dando la inversión para un dominicano invertir, porque en Dominicana existe la inversión para uno.
Sí, para tú
progresar,
claro. Pero te
claro,
digo,
eso es lo más importante.
Es lo que yo te digo, que en eso yo te puedo decir que tú te aseguras lo que es un dinero que tú tengas. Tú dices, yo lo voy a invertir en terreno para tener vacas, tener chivos, hacer una empresa de algo para yo tener dinero siempre. Eso,
siempre.
Claro, pero no se va, ese dinero no se va.
Klaus, do you hear what he's saying, his response?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to get to that, to the investment of a country. Igualmente porque en Colombia es muy diferente. Pero, o sea, de un dominicano que te dice que quieren invertir en Dominicana es muy diferente que en Colombia.
Yep. It's
so you know, I just want to make the point because the NRS movement and the people of that movement have talked about the Dominican Republic being this place that has to be invested in because it's a profitable place. And in Colombia, it's the same thing. So when I bring a Dominican who talks about it, the only reason I bring him on is because in first person, I can speak to the fact that challenges that the Dominican Republic face and the challenges that the Dominican Republic will overcome are just very easy. If that makes sense.
Yep. Now let's see this other. So will Próspera be a libertarian slash anarcho-capitalist utopia? Sort of, but not really. The people behind Próspera are mostly libertarians, but they're trying to avoid using the word libertarian too much when talking about their project. Partly because the libertarian brand scares people, but partly because their vision is more complicated than just small government. Charter cities fall into an awkward crack in libertarian ideology. Almost every libertarian agrees that you can make rules, even arbitrary rules, about what people can do on your own property. And anyone who wants to stay on your property has to follow your rules. But what's the difference between this versus a government owning its territory and making rules for its citizens? In practice, the difference is that going in someone's house or even their own golf course is a choice you made, and they have clear title of ownership. But being in a country happens involuntarily, and the president doesn't own America in the same way an ordinary person might own a house. But if someone did own an entire city and you choose to be in that city, theoretically they should be able to make whatever laws they wanted, and not even the most zealous libertarian could protest. The issue hadn't really come up before, but here we are. Prospera is erring on the side of small government because that's what they expect will work best. But their overriding motive is making their city a nice place to live and work, and when small government conflicts with that, the city usually wins. So, for example, when you buy land in Prospera, you will have to sign a covenant restricting vice industry uses, i.e., you can't turn your house into a joint brothel plus casino and do unethical medical experiments in the basement. Even the strictest libertarian has to admit this is fair. If you sign a contract, you've got to follow it. But you can tell HPI plans to have the town to be ship-shape, well-organized, and family-friendly, instead of the sort of Wild West vibe some people associate libertarianism with. Also, Prospera remains bound by several Honduran laws that Honduras refuses to exempt them from, including laws against abortion, euthanasia, and most gun ownership. Close quote. Now, this sounds really based, apart from the gun ownership one. I think people should be able to own guns, period. But as the article clearly states here, the Honduran government was strict on certain things that Prospera simply could not do. And they did have laws against abortion and euthanasia, and it says most gun ownership, which I think are reasonable. So again, it's not a sort of foreign entity imposing its will on sort of the local traditions of a country. They were very much accommodating to what the Honduran government stated. You know, these are red lines that you can't cross, and they agreed. They were like, yeah, sure, we don't mind. Um, Henry, I don't know if you have anything to say in regards to that. Yo, Henry? Hello? Hello? Oh, well, I guess I guess he's out. Because I'm alone in this one for now. Let me see. Now, it says here, but they'll at least have really low taxes, right? The lowest in the world. The Prospera Charter declares that income taxes cannot exceed 10%. Anyone who wants to raise taxes above that will have to pass a full constitutional amendment in a system deliberately designed to be hard to change. There are also some minor taxes, but the charter says that, after certain conditions are met, total taxes may never exceed 7.5 of GDP, and total debt may not exceed 20% of GDP, with various specifications and caveats. From HPI documentation, this is a key improvement upon the American system, as unlimited debt can potentially lead to untenable fiscal situations which threaten the economic health, stability, and shared prosperity of the jurisdiction. Where do the taxes go? 12% go to Honduras as their incentive for allowing status at all. 44% go to the general service provider, a private company that handles things like sanitation and power. This will probably be an HPI subsidiary, which subcontracts out to Jacobs Engineering, the same company that did a lot of work in Sandy Springs. 44% will go to the Próspera municipal government to handle whatever services they can't subcontract out. How does HPI make money? They get a cut of the membership fees and the general service provider money, but the real cash cow is probably land development. They buy empty land, develop it into a thriving city, and then sell it to people who want to live in thriving cities at a huge markup. The more thriving the city, the higher the land value, and the more money HPI makes, which they think puts the incentives in the right place. Okay, but what will Prospera be like? So some business people have gotten a once-in-a-lifetime chance to design a utopian city of the future from the ground up. The Honduras government will let them do great innovative things. They're incentivized to do great innovative things. They have enough money and talent to be able to do great innovative things. What particular kinds of great innovative things are they planning to do? And then they go through a list of how things will look like in Prospera. I think this is the one thing where I disagree with them on. I don't really enjoy this type of architecture. It's too futuristic, and I would like to see a bit more of colonial era or at least Mayan inspired architecture. So that's definitely something that I'm not really liking. This doesn't look too particularly bad. I do enjoy this sort of. I think this is based off of wood. Yeah, this is kind of like a wooden based roof. That's a little better. I do like that. I mean, it says here select your home based on community of your friends and neighbors. I don't have an issue with that. So yeah, I think we could definitely change the designs on this. It's just a bit too, ethnically. You could say, what do you say, ethnically nondescript. I would certainly say doesn't really inspire anything. So yeah, see, it just looks like Avatar and like in not the best way. So let me see. This is something that I really like. It really looks nice. Now it says here that a lot of these houses will be pretty hefty in terms of price. And it says here, but what about the poorest Honduran laborers who can't afford 450 a month? About month. And then it says here, quote, for blue collar laborers under even tighter economic circumstances, Lava Architects, in partnership with the Honduran architect, have created something we call the beta residencies for now, which can be built for less than 40K and in less than 60 days. These are specifically designed for very low-income Hondurans to be able to move into Prospera alongside the wealthy expats. As urban planning literature shows, having a diverse cross-section of class and culture is important for community cohesion, especially early on when the community is just forming. Some of them are already built. These cities aren't too bad. I mean, these are sort of structures. Again, I would like them to be even more trad. Maybe I'm a bit larpy when it comes to that. So, but again, these don't look particularly too bad. And then they talk about the education system. It says, quote, if some students are capable of learning 2 years of standard school mathematics in 1 year, whereas other students can only learn half a year of standard mathematics in 1 year, personalized learning systems will allow schools to customize education for the needs of individual students. Competency-based refers to the fact that schools should focus on whether or not students have mastered the academic content rather than how many credit hours they have taken on a subject. The fact is, some students are very fast in some subjects and slow in others. Some students are fast in all subjects, and some students are slow in all subjects. Learning systems should reflect the diversity of student interests and abilities. Close quote. And I really enjoyed that as well because it clearly shows that the Prospera guys have kind of really zoned in on this kind of education system that we have right now that basically trains people to be sort of worker drones. It doesn't really incentivize sort of creativity and academic excellence. It's kind of very it's not good at all, really. So I like the fact that they realized how this should actually work as opposed to how it does work right now. And it says here, and as examples of what they list every successful private school ever, including ones whose philosophies contradict each other, like Montessori and No Excuses. Although I was recently accused of doing this, so whatever. Trey says they're negotiating with someone involved in Montessori schools to bring one to Próspera as their first educational institution. And in terms of secondary education, they had to deal with Technical University of Munich, a very well-regarded German university.
Un señor de Barahona dijo.
But it looks like German leftists pressured them into withdrawing. Currently, they are investigating a partnership with Unidad Francisco Marroquín, a libertarian university in Guatemala City, which, for example, has a Ludwig von Mises library, which has 100,000 visitors annually and is the most extensive collection of works on liberty in Latin America, and whose alumni include, for example, one of Julian Assange's defense lawyers. Close quote. I'm actually kind of jealous of that. I didn't even know there was a libertarian university in Guatemala City, and which has a certain amount of pedigree. I'm so jealous, bro. That's kind of crazy. Now it says here they have a health system and medical tourism, medical licensing. It says your Próspera plans to be the first polity to allow complete medical reciprocity with all the developed nations plus Honduras. That means if you're American, if you're an American, French, Japanese, etc. doctor with a valid American, French, Japanese, etc. medical license, you are licensed to practice medicine and Próspera.
Absolutely.
This policy is close to my heart because, like many people, I've had Uber drivers who were doctors back in their home countries. They're stuck driving Ubers because the US insists that nobody, not British doctors, not Canadian doctors, nobody can work in the US unless they repeat their last 4 years of training in an American hospital. American hospitals don't have many training positions and reserve the ones they do have for American med students, so most of them can't do it. Meanwhile, my patients complain of having to wait months to get a desperately needed appointment, and the hospitals just say, well, there aren't enough doctors. They're just all driving Ubers because of regulatory failure. I'm not sure Próspera goes far enough. A lot of the real gains would come from allowing Indian or Iranian doctors, but go further than anywhere else. Close quote. I think I'm going to disagree with the writer on that. Maybe, at least with the Indian ones, I don't necessarily trust the Indian medical education system, just personally. But the Iranian one, yeah, I guess, sure. Although I would like to see a lot of Hispano doctors in Próspera, and that's why I've kind of always been very annoying with this. We have to achieve academic excellence. Hispanos have to be aiming for straight A's all across the board, and certainly getting A's in med school would be great because then we wouldn't really need Iranian doctors. We would just have our own doctors, which are just as good. And then also I like this, what they're saying, quote, likewise, Próspera has 100% drug approval reciprocity. If a drug has been approved in an OECD country, e.g. by the FDA, it's approved in Próspera. Again, close to my heart. Amisulpride is a great antipsychotic, probably better than most of the ones we use here. It's approved in Europe, the UK, Australia, Israel, etc., where many studies have shown it's safe and effective. Because none of those studies were done in the US, the FDA refuses to approve it here, and has demanded several $100 million worth of more studies, which the company involved has chosen not to do. An injectable version was recently approved for nausea, but can't be easily used for psychosis. Meanwhile, bupropion, the fourth most well-prescribed antidepressant in the US, isn't approved for depression in Britain. The subset of patients who respond to this medication and nothing else are out of luck. Próspera will be one of the only places in the world where patients will have access to amisulpride, bupropion, and all the other medications that one country or another is restricted because it wasn't invented here. Now, I didn't know that's why they restricted medications from other countries. I would have assumed that it was something related with genetics. So, say for example, if a medicine is approved for use in China and it was mostly tested on Han Chinese people, it might not be as effective with, say, sub-Saharan Africans, Amerindians, Semites, Indo-Europeans. I thought it was mostly based on sort of there being enough of a genetic difference in people to where some drugs just would not work on certain ethnic groups. But apparently not. It's just medical protectionism, which kills a lot of people and makes medicine stupidly hard. And the government says, see, it's the capitalist system, which is making your drugs so expensive. So therefore, we shall subsidize medicine and blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, you are just a subject of the state. And that's all you ever will be if you continue on this road. But I really like what Próspera is doing over here. Henry, I don't know if you want to talk about this, this sort of reciprocity thing that Próspera's got going on.
Yeah, I'm just listening in. It's accurately said. And what you just said, it's 100% right. Próspera is challenging the institutional side of it, church, whatever it is, because Próspera is challenging. You're completely right.
All right, so here's kind of a crazy thing that
Yeah, and if I fall short, the reason is because I'm just saying that what Klaus has said is what Próspera is challenging, and it's what we see today to this day.
Yep. So, quote, what are property rights like? 3D, possibly on the blockchain. A Próspera society is sold in three-dimensional voxels, e.g., 1 by 1 by 1 meter cubes, which is supposed to solve air rights debates once and for all. The idea is, imagine I have a house with a nice view of the beach, but my neighbor right in front of me wants to build a tower that blocks my view. Can he do it? In the US, the answer is depends what happens after 10 years of lawsuits and city council meetings. In Próspera, the answer is depends on who owns the voxels the tower is going through. So if I want to prevent my neighbor from building a tower and blocking my view, I can buy the air above his house the tower would have to pass through. Then if my neighbor builds there, he's trespassing on my property. But if my neighbor wants to buy a house and make sure he has the option to expand it into a tower 5 years later, he can buy the air above his house along with the ground, and then nobody can tell him what to do on his own property. In practice, this is going to look more like Próspera selling everybody ground level voxels, then agreeing to sell or not sell higher up voxels, depending on whether they want to zone land for higher density construction. What happens if the person who owns the base of a skyscraper wants to raise it, but the person who owns the fifth floor doesn't want it raised? I'm not sure, but other jurisdictions already do something like this. New York City has a hackish, partially 3D property rights system, so probably someone's already thought about it. All right, so it says here, and it's basically talking about how this whole voxel thing works, land-based tokens. It says one way to capitalize and fund the purchase and development of land is through the use of a land-backed crypto token. In effect, anyone in the world could buy one of these tokens issued for a specific plot of land. This capital would then be used to purchase and develop the land, with the secondary market enabling early movers to profit as the development grows, and with HPR or some other financial partner potentially buying all the tokens back at the successful development of the lot. This would powerfully democratize land development away from the wealthy and open the space up to everyone else. So, now the government part, I mean, it seems like it's kind of, you see, I mean, there's some democratic element baked into the system, but it's not 100% democratic because you all know the issues with that. see. Da, 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 da. Da, da. Da, da. Yeah, I mean, this is just basically how, I guess the more boring parts, like, the the legislative and the judicial parts of it. Da, 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 da. Da, da. And then here, it's very interesting thing about, like, if you don't, you can kind of schism yourself. Here says your quote. We wanted to allow for the creation of internal competitive pressure on ourselves. As such, by the Charter, any community can create a community interest declaration and displace the GSP entirely within the limits of their community. It's a miniature competitive jurisdiction within the larger Próspera jurisdiction. It still has to comply with Próspera statutes, but it's free to make its own rules just like an HOA does, and is free to hire its own security like many private developments around the world do. Unlike anywhere else in the world, it also displaces the rest of the jurisdiction's provisions of services in that area. So if an intrepid individual wants to create a better community with better rules and administration that we have, we invite them to come do it. Test drive your Marxist commune in Próspera. Maybe it will work this time. If it does, then people can move out of the rest of Próspera and into your little community. And instead, it will have to adapt its meta institutions accordingly. I really appreciate that because it kind of gives people the ability to kind of play The Sims in real life and basically say, well, okay, I kind of like what you guys are doing, but I want to put my own little spin on it. Well, it appears that you can, as a matter of fact. And then here it says, well, what stops Honduras from pulling the rug out from under them after they're successful? And it says here that Próspera is guaranteed by an international treaty, and especially speaking, it's the Honduras Kuwait Treaty for Reciprocal Investment. And there we go. Then what Honduras incentives be? It says they went into this hoping that says would be economically productive, and this would benefit the rest of Honduras and let them skin a little off the top. If they actually become economically productive, letting that benefit the rest of Honduras and skim a little off the top still seems like their best bet. But if push came to shove, they could take over the site by military force. But that would be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. China didn't take over Hong Kong because they wanted its money. They already had as much of its money as they ever cared to take. They took over Hong Kong because they wanted to maintain autocratic rule, and having a successful democracy inside their border was too awkward. And then there's a further reading on that. And then apparently there's another city called Ciudad Morazán, which is more on the mainland. This seems to be more on the coast. Apparently they're less flashy and ideological and publicity seeking than Próspera. And then so it's kind of something similar. But again, I really don't like the architecture part. They really got to get that sorted out, bro. This looks very milquetoast and not at all inspiring. This appears to be not this doesn't appear to be Próspera, but this is Ciudad Morazán. I mean, why not have Mayan architecture? Like, why does it have to be a sort of very bland university campus like? I mean, this literally does look like my university campus. So I will definitely have to talk to people about that. And then it just keeps going on. There we go. There we go. Let's see if there's anything more. And that's the comment section. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else. I mean, look, this type of architecture is a little better. It does remind me of it reminds me quite a bit of Colombia, especially like in the more developed fincas. I mean, this kind of looks like what an arco would have, but I do like I do like their architecture there a little bit more. It blends better with the local culture and customs. And I think that's about it. I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. Just wanted to give you guys the summary of what Henry dug up, and it seems like a very interesting project. Checho, do you have anything to say on the
Well,
matter?
I would say that Henry has really good investigative skills and capabilities. Like it was really nice, a really nice project on to keep an eye on, and as a means to better the life of us Hispanos in our own countries, to avoid corruption, to fight bad administration, and to govern ourselves. Always remembering that we ought to be under God's eyes. Gotta keep always a sense of community and helping our families, not just as an individualist, as an individual unit, but to see ourselves as something bigger. As of that, so I think that it is really cool, and I gotta give it to him. Like Henry is a really really nice researcher.
Yeah, that was a real gem he picked up, and if I wasn't a broke college student, I would definitely put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. I'd like to invest some of my money in that project. But now that we kind of gave you the first part of this episode, we wanted to talk about something else. Thankfully, Checho came in, and
Colombia, papi.
yes, we're going to talk about our homeland, la tierrita de uno, que a veces le duele a uno en el corazón, right? We sometimes feel a little heartbroken because of what happens in our country. And so let me just so here's what's been going on in Colombia. So Checho, do you want to give a brief summary of what's been going on? You want to make
Well, yeah,
comments?
there's been riots for 2 or 3 days because of a new tributary law that the government, well, the Ministry of Finance wants to pass on the Congress, and it will basically tax everyone in the consumer realm. In other words, people have less money to for food and everything, and it because of the lockdowns, unemployment, poverty rising to 45%, people had enough, and they were pissed, and especially in cities like Cali, that it is in the Pacific, uh, which is basically burning down as we talk right now. There's a lot of fighting between the police and the protesters. There's been riots, smaller ones in Medellin. There's been more or less medium-sized riots in Bogota, and well, there's been everything with it. You can see the social angst, the divisiveness of society, and you can see that this can be the proper environment for a socialist kind of Chavez government in the next elections. We will be in 18 months, and everything is getting too political. There's been a lot of um, controversy about raising taxes in an economic crisis, and the president is making more or less of a bad administration, I would say.
Absolutely. The president has been a total disaster ever since COVID hit. Before COVID, he was kind of like your average mediocre Colombian president. He didn't really do anything that was very impressive or grand, but he wasn't like a complete fuck up. Like he was just very much regular, as we like to say. And then COVID hit, and he thought that he was going to be smart and lock everything down. Initially, it was first for 2 weeks, and then, as we already know, he kept extending the deadline for lockdowns further and further and further. And and then even after lockdowns, quote unquote, officially ended in September, there was still a lot of restrictions, like what do you call those curfews? We had we were restricted from visiting other cities. So, for example, I used to live in Manizales. I couldn't go to any other city unless I had a what they call a mobility permit, permiso de movilidad, where it said that I was an essential worker and that I was authorized to basically be on the road. And so this has been going on for the longest time. And well, lockdowns have financial consequences. And so what ended up happening was that the government realized that there was a massive budget hole. There were apparently trillions of pesos, which constitutes, billions of dollars, that the government had to have in order to finance certain things that it just didn't have. And well, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to institute a budget reform. If I'm not mistaken, that's what they call it in English. Let me see.
Well, you gotta, well, first of all, like, not only do lockdowns have consequences, but the Colombian economy is 80% if informal. It lives day by day, and most of people, if they were eating 3 times a day, it was too much. Most of people ate 2 times a day. Some of their own family were sick, or they had difficulties in order to access the work market, or to basically just work. You couldn't get outside of your own city at certain hours. You should be in your home. So what this happened is that this raised not only mental health issues on the people, but it raised hunger, poverty, inequality, and I think that there is a problem because there's a total amount of money in the state that goes into corruption, into some politicians. I am not calling names, but some politicians' pocket, and not only that, but there is a ton of money that is inefficient. Like, you have some ministries that could be diminished, like the culture ministry to secretarías de gobierno, to governor, to secretaries, local secretaries. You have the
The
you can,
sports ministry, Mintic. There's like a bunch of government entities that we could just like get rid of, and nothing would happen.
I still inform the institutes like Contraloría, Procuraduría, that all they do is search where if the money in the government is being applied to. Like, we have a ton of corruption here. If you could only assure to the taxpayer that his taxes are going to go to the realm that they are destined for, I think that only with that you could enhance Colombia's economy. But there's not that security. Corruption is eating us away, and there's a ton of spending. Like, we have secretarias de género, genre secretaries,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Basically, that those are like, so think of gender ministries and equality ministries. So we're basically copying the same shit that the fucking Europeans are doing for no reason, because I don't know, gendered violence or whatever. Like, they just come up with the dumbest thing to come up with new government positions, right? It's just complete blood sucking of the Colombian taxpayer.
Yeah, and you have a Colombian that is paying more taxes, that he can't go to work, that he's feeling hungry. Like, I understand where these protesters are coming on, because there's blame on both sides. Like, if you protest, don't destroy your local neighbor's store or his business. He has been on credit, he's in debt, he barely has food to feed his own children, and you're gonna destroy whatever he has left with. That is really unfair. But the government too has its own pitfalls. I think that we are right now in the vespers to a revolution, civil war, or in the best of cases, into a transition, democratic transition. It will be a dictatorial government as of Chavez. I would like if it would be like Francisco Franco, Antonio Oliveira, you know, but we are not heading there.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, the thing is that, if y'all are not Colombian, y'all are gonna have to. Yeah, like, let me tell you about what happened in 2018. So we had presidential elections in 2018, and there was a runoff. So basically, in the first round, there wasn't enough votes to single out one candidate definitively. So we had to do a second round of election, and in that second round, we had two candidates. Ivan Duque was the quote unquote right wing candidate, and then Gustavo Petro was the left wing candidate. And what was worrying is that even though President Duque won, Petro received about 8 million votes, which is basically the second highest amount of votes anyone has ever gotten. Now, if you don't know who Gustavo Petro is, he is an ex terrorist from a leftist guerrilla known as the M19 movement, who was most active in the 80s and in the 90s. They disbanded in the 90s, but a lot of their members ended up in politics. And the M19 movement was very influential in drafting the 1991 Colombian Constitution, which is a very leftist constitution. For whatever reason, we decided to to concede to the left to just a bunch of things that we shouldn't have conceded. So with the 91 Constitution, the state officially became secular. There was a lot of there were a lot of amendments to that constitution and a lot of provisions that essentially lead to where we are right now. But we can talk about that topic a little bit later. So what Duque was supposed to be is this continuation of Uribe's legacy. So good, decent governance, good security, try to lower out of control spending and taxes, and try to fight corruption. And then, you know, whether he did that or didn't do that before COVID, I can't really say. I would have to have more information on
Well,
that
I
topic.
can say it. The thing about Duque is that he was really invested in international relationship. He made various FTAs like with Israel.
Oy vey, oy vey.
Always he tried to enhance the economy, macroeconomy for companies. He tried to make Colombia attractive. He had a lot of riots. He invested a ton on public education, but he isn't very authoritative or very decisive, I would say, in his local governance. Like he was mainly like the good guy, try to be at peace with everyone, try to be cool with everyone.
Yes.
You can be everyone's friend.
Bro, I hated that so freaking much. And actually, I'm not even gonna lie to you. And maybe you've seen this in some bookstores. He has a book literally called El Futuro es del Centro. Like, what he's trying to say, like the future is in centrism or in the middle. Now, maybe that was also a reference to the party that he belongs to, which is El Centro Democrático. But it's kind of like a double meaning. It's like centrism is the future, but in Colombia, centrism means basically conceding everything to the left and pretending you conceded something to the right, which you barely
He's
did.
basically trying to be like a neocon, conceding to the left, and just as a quote unquote right, you're just gonna keep good international relationship while everything goes down south.
Yep, and you know, not to mention that he didn't do anything about the HEP. For those of you who don't know, HEP is supposed to be this Truth and Reconciliation Council between the FARC and their victims, and it's turned out to be a complete joke. I mean, we can have just another episode on that.
Well, we could have a ton of episodes in just the last 5 years on Colombian history.
Pretty much, right? And so Duque's biggest mistake was shutting the whole country down. Like that was his first big mistake. And when he started doing that, when he extended the quarantine a second time, I started thinking, this is gonna end up in Petro getting elected next election. Like this is gonna completely ruin him. And I called it then, and I'm calling it now, right? And then his second biggest mistake was this budget reform, because everyone's pockets have been sucked dry. Every single person in the Colombian economic ladder, even the Estrato 4 and Estrato 5 people have been hit
Even
by
the
this
rich
pandemic.
top 10% have.
Even they've been hit by this. So he's now at a point where he doesn't have any base. Like he's not like Donald Trump, where you can tell that Donald Trump has a base of his own, right? He doesn't have that because he's made so many concessions to the left that the right soured on him. A lot of us who consider ourselves right wing started disliking Duque because he was just being such a bitch to the left. He was basically agreeing with him on so many things for no friggin' reason, right? And so we already don't like him. We started to dislike him a bit, right? The left will always hate anyone who's to the right of frigging Mao, right? That's just their opinion, like 24/7. They think that Duque is like this fascist thing. Like, bro, I saw graffiti in Manizales that was like Duque fascista. I'm like, bro, I wish he was, yeah, as he
Bro,
will
like
shoot you. He will
the
shoot you
thing is
niggas on sight, bro. Shut up, like.
that's the part about Colombia that people got to understand. In the 80s, you got presidents that will go to presidency because they were not dead. Gaviria. You gotta remember that in the 80s and 90s, the presidency was won over bullets and won over cartels and won over, now it's won over graffitis and LGBT plus people dancing and public and making memes on
and
Instagram.
and and cheap slogans that don't mean anything.
Yeah, and you can see that the public policy is basically, I will do everything that the youth want in order to be liked. And bro, young people don't even know what they are about. Like they don't know what to do. They just like to get drunk and be like, oh yeah, government is so bad. You don't have any personal agency nor responsibility. Why would I want to hear you?
Yeah, this whole meme of like trying to focus on university students, like politics wise, it's just the stupidest thing ever. And this has been going on in Western and like at least in Europe ever since the '60s because there were a lot of student movements in the '60s. The most famous ones being in the United States and in Germany, and I think in France too. In Germany, it's known as the generation of 68. In France, it was the generation of '69. All this counterculture stuff, and we are somehow still living in that almost 60 years later,
Yeah, in
which is
Colombia, everything happens 40 years later.
yo facts, bro. And we're starting to get into that countercultural moment where now back in my day when I was a kid, it was all about what are the elders saying. It's the people who are 40 and 50 years old who know what they're doing, but now
Yeah, who
everything's
have
just
been working, have families.
exactly, they know more than just anyone else, right? Because they're young enough to where their mind is not completely melted. They're not like senile, but they're also old enough that they have a lot of wisdom, right? But nowadays it's like the younger you are, the wiser you are. I mean, this is why we have things like people like Greta Thunberg, right? And it's just like, and everyone just wants to pay attention to fucking college students who are literal marihuaneros who don't know what they're doing.
They're crackpots, crackheads.
I've heard of stories that there are quote unquote students who are like 28 years old and have like 20 semesters in university in public university, La Nacional, and like the ones, the
Yeah,
typical,
lefty public universities.
just a total mess, right? And so yeah, but anyways, so the president made a total mistake in introducing this because just at this point, before he introduced that budget reform, people were even people that were supposed to like him were starting to dislike him because of the lockdowns, because of the indecisiveness, right? And then he slaps this on the entire public, and everyone just revolts, right? Everyone is pissed off. Everyone is protesting. People are rioting. Let me show you a video. This happened in Manizales because we have to copy everything the United States does for whatever reason. So here is a bunch of students tearing down. Apparently, it was a statue of a guy called Sate Avendaño. He was apparently a nationalist born in Manizales. So you guys can think of this as a sort of the Colombian version of the founding fathers of racism, whatever, right? These are so again, we're copying the same thing that the Americans are doing for some stupid reason.
Yeah, I think that that's part of a cultural hegemony that America has. You can see that there's Black Lives Matter ads and publicity in Korea. Like, there
Oh
ain't
my
no
god,
blacks in Korea.
Jesus.
So yeah, I think that part of it is that this iconoclasm, this kind of erasing history, of erasing the past, it is affecting the youth because, oh, we are the future is now. Bro, like, you gotta first start to get off your parents' house and start to not only think and philosophize, which is important, but to work on your life. Like, if you can't command yourself, you can't command anyone. How are you gonna command your family or your local government, your mayor? How are you gonna command a department, a state, or the country? So I think that the worst part of it is that all of this hunger, social angst, this bitterness, it was all mixed up by the lockdowns. And you had a very divided country before the lockdowns because everyone was some people were feminists, other were pro LGBT, anti LGBT. You have the conservative, you have people that follow Uribe, you have Partido Verde, which are basically the ecologists, which are lefty. So you had all of these divided political parties, but now that the lockdowns, they are all united. So if Duque did anything right, he united the country against him.
But unfortunately, I think that unity is going to turn a lot of people into the left because let me tell you what I think is going to happen. So the populist leftists are taking advantage of these protests, and what people like Petro are gonna do is say, "Well, see, I was running up against this guy who wants to raise your taxes and who put you in lockdowns and this and that, and you should have voted for me. And but hopefully I'm gonna run next year, and so you can vote for me." And now everyone is so angry at Duque and by extension at Uribismo that essentially Uribismo is dead in Colombia, which I personally think is a good thing because this is a really outdated boomer sort of neocon ideology anyway, and it needed to die.
Yeah,
Like
it is
when
pro Bush. Like the Bush administration ended a long time ago.
exactly, and we somehow got stuck with this sort of yeah, exactly this sort of Bush type thing until this year, right, and until next year. So unfortunately, Duque's incompetence has set up what the left, Colombian left, has been salivating for decades, right? A Petro presidency. And I've personally already told people, in my Facebook and my WhatsApp, I've told them like, hey, buy dollars and buy Bitcoin because the peso is not going to be worth anything in 10 years from now. Okay.
Inflation, like inflation is gonna come out like really not only inflation, but you will understand first of all like the dollar. Tú sabes que el peso colombiano pasó de 3.500 a 3.800.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, the Colombian peso went from 3,500 to 3,800.
Yeah, it is devaluating really fast. And the
Yep.
thing is that elections are going to be in 15 months. And the left is going to gather on this new public that is angry, that is hungry, and these quote unquote right wing people that just had enough and they don't have any good candidate. Like, I think that Alejandro Char, that he would be a great candidate because, well, your Uribismo is basically a dead political movement as of this point, and we shouldn't ponder onto it, but we should ponder to its base. Like, I think that the future of the country would be like a centrist Fajardo, more or less. We will be between Alejandro Char, we basically a market liberal and a very uh, he likes to work not in the clear light of the law. I will not say more. And between
Damn.
Gustavo Petro, which is basically Leninist.
Yep. And I've kind of been on a couple of forums and all that, and bro, the regionalism in this country is insane. They're like, no, you can't vote for Chad because he's a fucking costeño, blah blah. I don't want a corroncho running my country, and I'm like, fuck that shit. I'd rather have 10 years of that guy than a single month of Petro. Like, I don't care where you're from, bro. Like, I really don't care about that shit. As long as you're not associated with those type of guys. And the thing is that, like, I think everyone's gonna forget that he used to be a literal ex-terrorist. Like, y'all are just gonna forget that he was literally part of internal armed conflict, like you're just gonna forgive him just because yes, this president sucks, and he's giving you, he's whispering sweet nothings into your ear and telling you like, if you vote for me, everything is gonna be all right. And I'm telling you, bro, this is if he gets elected, and I mean at this point you might have to say when he's elected, that's gonna be a severe. It's going to be like a very important point in our country's history because that's going to be the point where being mantenido and malandro and
Welfare, being on
mamerto,
welfare, being a
yes,
crackhead, a pothead,
that is going to be
the common.
normalized to levels you have not even witnessed.
I'm pro LGBT, I'm pro feminist, I'm pro
Right?
ecologism. Basically,
Yes.
your common college in the US.
Yes. Because Colombians have no political identity, right? We follow trends all the time. We have I don't think we've ever been a political leader in anything, right? We either
Well,
follow.
you would say that maybe in the 19th century, but that has been like more than a century ago.
Yeah, yeah. If we're not following the French, we're following the Americans, or we're following the Europeans in general, right? And the trendy thing in Colombia is to be some sort of European social democrat like Sweden or whatever, right? That's what all the university college kids want to be nowadays, and right, and Petro is the guy that whispers into their ears like, yeah, we're gonna be just like Sweden, and we're gonna be, you know how this goes, right? He's
We
preaching this.
don't have real socialism. That was Vietnam was not real socialism. We need real Cuba. Cuba is not real socialism. We are gonna have real socialism.
Exactly. And the worrying thing was that before this whole lockdown thing, people wouldn't believe what he said. Like people wouldn't buy, like the normal average Colombian wouldn't buy his bullshit. But everyone's so desperate and everyone is so eager to punish Uribismo that they're just willing to give their vote away to the one guy that has been criticizing them this whole time, most loudly, the opposition. If guys think of it as like, say for example, in the UK, right? You have the Conservatives and you have the Labour Party, and then you have the Jeremy Corbyns of the Labour Party, very very leftist. Corbyn literally was good friends with Chavez, so he was into that whole socialism thing. And so imagine if Boris Johnson handled the pandemic so badly that even normie Conservative Party voters are willing to give their vote away to Jeremy Corbyn. Like this is how bad we've gotten, politically speaking. So unfortunately, if a miracle happens and someone like Char gets elected, that gives us a lot of breathing room because then we can finally kill Uribismo for once and for all, right? Tell all the Uribistas, your guy's over. Stop salivating over him. Find someone else. Colombian politics has moved along, right? It has moved past Uribe, right? Just let him have his accomplishments. He did have some good things. He did do some good things in his first term. It's his second term. You can talk about that more. But anything after that, Uribe has been a net negative to the Colombian right because we keep being associated with this guy, right? And he's now had more L's than dubs, as of
Yeah,
now.
we don't have another candidate or another proposal to ponder on. Like, I think that the right is basically not only gonna fall, but going to divide. You will have the libertarians and this liberal market, and the people to that one side. You will have the more fascist types on the other side. You will have the more Catholic guys on the other right. So I think that the right that was basically the Uribismo, it is not the people are not gonna die off, but I think that it is gonna transmute or transform into another forms of political identity. The thing is that that will take so long, like 5 to 10 years, and we need it like in 15 or 18 months. So
But well, unfortunately, and I'm gonna say this in Spanish, nos va a tocar comer mierda para saber para saber qué tan bueno lo teníamos antes, right? We're gonna have to eat shit just to remember how good we had it, even with the pandemic, even with the protests, even with all of that, right? Because a Petro presidency could very easily start the Venezuelanification of Colombia. That's the problem with these leftist guys. You can't give them a single chance because on the one chance you give them, as the people think of giving Petro, just because they're frustrated, a lot a lot of your shit's gonna get either expropriated or inflated away, or the insecurity is gonna go through the roof. Right? We all know what happens when a Latin American leftist populist takes power. Right? And I mean, the only country that I can think of that didn't have this issue was Bolivia under Evo Morales. For whatever reason, he didn't turn his country into complete shit. He's been able to manage it somehow well. But just look at the list. You have Cuba, you have Venezuela, you have Chile during the Allende years. Um, in some sense, some parts of the Dilma Rousseff administration, which I mean,
Lula da Silva, isso foi uma muito boa, muito mala administração.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is that a lot of people don't want to admit to that because all of the faults that happened with Lula's administration ended up like everything he did wrong, like the consequences, you didn't feel the consequences until Gilma came in. So everyone wants to blame Gilma for what actually were Lula's mistakes, and then you have Kirchnerismo, right? So it's like you, and then you have AMLO, right? So it's like you can't give these guys a single opportunity, like you just can't, right?
And not
And
only that, but we always gotta remember that not only the political but the social consequences. Like people think that we're gonna tax the rich, we're gonna impose taxes. Bro, the rich people are gonna pack their bags, they are gonna sell everything, take their money with them, go to Miami, they will go to Panama, they will go to Britain, to Germany, to Switzerland. They will get out of the country. And you know who's gonna pay for those taxes? The middle class. The middle
yep,
class and the poor people.
estratos 1 a 3. That's who's gonna eat the most shit, and those are the people who we should be we should be able to convince very easily, right? But now they're being led astray by this guy, and that's what I'm telling you. Like Colombia is going to have to go through what Venezuela is going through, just so that we can learn this lesson. And I hate saying that because I have a lot of family in Colombia, right? It's like, I'm sure that you do too, right? We are, as Colombian as an arepa, right? My parents are Colombian. My grandparents are
Parents
Colombian.
are
My great
Colombian. My great grandparents are Colombian. I have land here. Not only land, I have family, and I can see that people are worried. My uncles, my cousins, my neighbors, everyone is like, "Well, what are we gonna do now?" I'm like, uh, "Pack, pack your bags." I don't know what else to tell them.
it sucks, bro. And just imagine, you know, you've lived in this land all your life, and you don't want to leave it. But if you don't leave it, either your life is going to be so shitty, you're going to be living in misery, or they're going to kill you, right? Someone's going to kill
Yeah,
you, either un ladrón, like, right, a thief, because you didn't want to give up your cell phone, or it's going to be like the colectivos in Venezuela. Like, sorry, you were going to say something.
no, no, no. I was gonna say that, yeah, things are really, really dangerous, like urban crime, common crime. Oh, and well, there's cartels here. The Sinaloa cartel is running. Not only them, but the guerrillas, narcos, paramilitares. We have all of these armed groups that are gonna profit from the anarchy.
Exactly. And now add to that, if it gets really, really bad, you might start having ideological crimes. So, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to criticize and I'm giving it the worst case scenario here. You might not be able to criticize the Petro government, and because if you do, you're going to have people knocking at your door, kind of like what Antifa is doing in the US. If you are publicly against Antifa, well, they might come to your house and start beating you up. And this is nothing weird in Colombian history. I think you know better than I do that before
See?
La Violencia used to have a lot of fighting between the conservative
The
elites and
liberals and the conservatives, like you could tell
yes.
that in the 50s and in the 40s, from 45 to 55th, like you would have one town full of people from the liberal party and the other full of the conservative party, and they would just get drunk and start hitting themselves with the machetes, like yelling at themselves, raping the other spouse, killing their daughters, taking their sons to as workers, well, workers, quote unquote, right? And you could see all of this destruction, these migrations in Colombia because of the violence. You could see all of this, like your family could get wrecked in between those fightings.
Yeah, and again, we could go through an entire episode of just that of what happened in that in la violencia in that period where you could get killed just for what you believed in. I mean, Americans like to complain about cancel culture. Well, we had something much worse than cancel culture back then, and it might come back again because you have a lot of these Twitter leftists, Colombian Twitter leftists, who are eager for that sort of revolutionary thing of, oh, we're gonna fight against the fascists and the capitalists and the patriarchy supporters and all that. And maybe, and then we might see the resurgence of paramilitarismo, like ese paramilitarismo puro y duro, like the OG paramilitares who might actually become way more ideological than the paramilitares from their day, from back in the day, because the paracos back then were essentially mercenaries, right? They weren't. I mean, there were some ideologically minded ones, but the paracos that may come back as a result of a Petro presidency might be like actual far right guys. Like we're talking like we can have paracos neo Nazis, like actual like straight up neo Nazi guys, not like what the left likes to call neo Nazis. We're talking straight up third position Hitlerists. You know.
Well, the thing about people forget that since before Bolivar and all of this quote unquote independence, we have 300 years of peace, right, under the Spanish crown. But once revolution hits home, then it's gonna be in it forever till like kingdom come. So what we have in these 200 years of quote unquote independence and quote unquote freedom of the Spanish oppression, which was the best administration that we would ever had, is that we've had straight up like 180 years of violence in during the 19th century. We had like seven or more civil wars. We have had a ton of political fighting, and the average Colombian, well, is really violent. I'm not saying that's nor bad or good, but that's a fact. We in the republic, we've only had like 20 years of peace, I would say, and those were more or less intention to build out for another war. So yeah.
That's so yeah, like it's actually kind of crazy how consistently violent we are throughout our history. It almost doesn't even make sense how our country can stay that violent for so long.
Yeah, like I would say that the best in south of the Rio Grande River till Isla del Fuego or the Falkland Islands, we are the best soldiers in the world because we have always been in war.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
and well, what happens is that we have like narcos here. We have presence of mercenaries. Like there were connections between Israeli officers with the paramilitaries, and they were training people here, giving them arms. Not only them, but there were like international mercenaries that went down here from all parts of the world. You have socialist groups financing here in Colombia. Not only, but you have like it is really easy in the black market. Don't quote me on this, I didn't say this ever, but I have heard that it is really easy to get guns, to get drugs, to sell drugs, and there's a big market to it. So I would say that there's a possibility that some people might as well just get their guns out, start going to the forest, start shooting the against the new government, the lefty socialist government, start a kind of civil war or a new revolution. and they will like be very, as you said, ideologically minded, like ultra nationalism, like some kind of very authoritative position as a reaction. Well, this is a speculating, but it is possible.
Highly possible because I mean Colombian history just, especially post Bogotazo history, shows you that whenever the left starts getting too violent, there's always a right wing counterattack, and with an officially leftist president at the helm, from what I've heard is that they will. What's the phrase they use in Spanish? It's a se van a reactivar las milicias. Is that what something like that? I heard someone say that if Petro becomes president, se van a reactivar las milicias, and the only thing I can think of
Yeah,
when
the reactivization of the paramilitary force, of not non-governmental and uh, mm, armed people.
yeah. So I'm not exactly yeah. So maybe they mean that the paramilitaries are gonna get back together. I have no idea what that means, but if Petro becomes president, I don't see anything good for Colombia in the short to midterm. I mean, I just don't. I've seen the story enough times to know where it's going, and the only white pill I can give in terms of that is that nowadays we do have ways of countering some of the effects of a leftist government. So, in the economic and financial sense, we can start buying gold, dollars, and Bitcoin to get away from the peso. And there are ways that we can save these investments or alternate savings so that people can't just rob them to you at gunpoint. In the social department, because again, a Petro presidency is just gonna amp up the LGBTQ, nonsense, and I'm sure there's gonna be critical race theory. They're gonna say that mestizos are the worst thing ever, and that we're oppressing the indigenous and the negros and the whatever. Right? They're gonna bring all these things from the U.S. So the one way we can counter that is just form our own communities, just ignore what they have to say, preach to the unconverted, tell people that this is just an import from the United States, this is just Anglo-Saxon nonsense. In the security department, it's hard because getting guns in Colombia is hard. But if you don't have guns already, start getting guns and start getting ammo because it's gonna get a little spicy. And yeah, I guess we had to learn this lesson too. Eventually, it did have to come to us being economically and socially ruined for a generation, so that people can understand that you cannot trust Latin American socialists ever, 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 ever. Like it's like
Yeah, I would say that you gotta always focus on the economic consequences, your personal, familiar, and not only that, but with this radicalization, I think that it would be a great way to. Well, I am not Catholic, I am Orthodox, but I would say that the best response to poverty, inequality, is found in the encyclical Rerum Novarum. Like it talk about how the Catholic Church is nor socialist nor capitalist, but it is in the middle ground. Like you ought to work, avoid usury, give charity, give your tithe to the church. Not because the church wants to be rich, but because the church has a social part to it, like helping the poor, widows, having hospitals and everything. And well, as an, I would tell that any Christian, or I would say, regardless of your denomination, I'm not calling for ecumenism, but you should try to be fair to others. Like this is a very bad time, and we ought to look for to our communities, right? Because I think that a great part to socialist regimes here in Latin America is to secularize people and make them forget about God.
100%, and not just that. They want to secularize them and then make the government their new god. That is what these economic populists always want. They want to take God away from the people and install themselves and the government as the new god. And what we have to tell the people is no, this is what they're doing with your money and your traditions and your views. They're completely distorting everything, and they want to make you a slave to the government. They want to keep you dumb and happy with this. There's, I think you've heard of the, what do you call it? Renta básica. They've already implemented. I think either they already implemented it or they're planning on implementing it. So they want people relying on the government. Or they don't want people to be productive on their own. That's why it's so difficult to start a business here. But it's so easy to get Gibbs. You know, I see what you're doing, government, and we have to help, and we have to help people who we know their finances are going to be destroyed by this money printing, which has been going on even with quote unquote right wing governments. This is like, even Uribe, even Duque, like they were on this shit as well. Like they didn't have a problem inflating the peso. So I don't want to say that this is that it wasn't them and they got off scot free. No, they were also just as guilty of causing this. So Checho, I would tell to your family that can't move out of Colombia to start securing their finances, especially if they're retirees. You might want to
Yeah,
talk to them about that.
yeah. You might want to take your money out of the state. Like, I think that that's a great part of what socialism does. That it inflates the state in order to you to always be not only dependent on it, but you can see that the relationship that the person has with the state, under a socialist government, is more or less like the relationship that one has with God. Like, oh, thank you so much because you are giving me. Oh yeah, please give me more. Oh, like you can see that there is a parallel in there, and not only that, but secularization leads to believe in everything. Like if you don't believe in God, you will believe everything that is thrown up on you, and you will stop being just. You will stop this sense of community, of humanity, of dignity, and you will see the other as not as a person, as a fellow son of God. Well, maybe someone that has his own trouble, but you will start seeing him as a political enemy, and that's the great part of polarization. That's like it separates its own citizens because you don't see ourselves as fellow men, but we see ourselves as an enemy and opposite because you are against my ideology. And I am not, again, I am not calling for us to be like, oh, we're gonna have commies here and we are gonna have socialists. No, no, no. I think that we ought to educate them and to tell them, hey, you are wrong because of this, and this. Like fight the intellectual fight, and in case they want to kill your family, you have a legitimate right as a Christian, as a Catholic, as an Orthodox to fight for your property. You have to a right to defend yourself. And to people that are here, I would say that start investing in cryptocurrency, educate yourself on business. If you can, get out of the country. Panama seems like a good alternative. Florida, Texas, Paraguay seems really nice. Here, maybe if you can go to Switzerland, go to Andorra, go to these small countries in Europe, start looking for a means to, well, you could live an agrarian life. You could buy your own land, or if you have your own land, go plant your food and grow your own cows if you can, as a means to avoid commerce or trade. But I think that not more most of people are not ready for that. But yeah, I think that you should reduce your relationship with the state to the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the modern state, as we know it today, is an invention of the French Revolution, and we know how anti-clerical and anti-Christian the French Revolution was, and how the revolutionaries literally wanted to replace Catholic France with a sort of secular, anti-Christian concept, and we can definitely talk about that later. But I thank you very much, Checho, for coming in. I think I'm going to wrap it up here at the 2 hour mark. I don't know if you're busy tomorrow, or we can make a Spanish edition of this podcast, because I want to make this thing bilingual so that both the pochos in the U.S. and the hispanos back home can understand what's happening in both places. The U.S.
Yeah,
and
please,
Hispanoamerica.
please, for everyone listening, please pray for Colombia. Please try to reach out to your Colombian friends. uh, hard times are coming, and the most that we need is knowledge. The most that we need is help, advice, and to gather each other. We are brothers, and as of that, we always gotta remember our role.
Yes, sir. Amen. Amen. And yes, please prayers up for Colombia. Man. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. You have a good one. Bye.